When I opened this email, I could feel the weight in every word. The subject line read, "They thought they broke me, but I broke the cycle." That alone gave me chills. What followed was the kind of story that leaves you stunned, not just because of the betrayal, but because of what she chose to do about it. This isn't just about infidelity, it's about a woman betrayed by the very people who raised her, and how she turned their cruelty into the most unexpected revenge I've ever read. She asked me to call her Emily, and that's what I'll do. Emily grew up believing her family was tight-knit, traditional, even her parents were respected, and her older brother was the golden child. But underneath the surface, everything was staged. Behind closed doors, love had rules and loyalty that only applied when it was convenient for them. What shocked me most wasn't just what they did to her, but how long they'd been doing it. This wasn't a single betrayal. This was a pattern, a legacy of silence, gaslighting, and manipulation. And when Emily finally started asking questions, they didn't try to comfort her. They shut her out, like she was the problem for noticing the cracks. I could feel her pain in every sentence, but also her strength. She didn't write this story to seek pity. She wrote it to reclaim her truth, to make sure no one else gets trapped in a family web like the one she escaped. Because yes, she escaped, but not before leaving behind a truth bomb that shattered everything they tried to hide. I'll be honest with you, this story made me question what loyalty really means, what we owe to the people who hurt us, and whether walking away is always enough, or if sometimes we're called to do more. Emily chose more, and what she did, it wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, but it was unforgettable. Emily was the youngest of three. Her parents, devout churchgoers with polished reputations, were the kind of couple who smiled wide in family portraits but lived in a house filled with cold silences. Her brother, Daniel, was 8 years older and always got away with everything. When Emily was 15, she started noticing things like the way her mother looked through her, or how conversations would stop when she walked into the room. It all came to a head on the day of her high school graduation, while her friends celebrated with families who held them tight and proud. Emily stood awkwardly at the edge of the parking lot, her father on his phone, her mother distracted, and Daniel nowhere to be found. She asked if he was coming. Her mother said flatly he had better things to do. No hug, no smile, just a car ride home in total silence. Years passed, and Emily did what she was taught: smile, comply, never question. But after college, she began asking herself, why did her family feel like strangers? Why did she always feel like an outsider in her own home? When she tried to get close to her mother, she was met with passive-aggressive comments or complete avoidance. Her father always changed the subject, and Daniel, he treated her like a nuisance. She started to feel like maybe she wasn't meant to be there. Then, one evening, Emily found an old photo album buried in the attic. She flipped through the pages, searching for anything that showed her as a baby. But the first photo of her didn't appear until she was about 3. No hospital pictures, no baby shower, nothing. And in the few photos that existed, everyone looked tense, forced smiles, her mom always standing slightly apart. That night, Emily couldn't breathe. Her fingers gripped the certificate so tightly it crumpled under the pressure. Maria Ellen Roth. The name echoed in her mind like a bell she couldn't unring. She paced the room, every step heavier than the last, as if the truth was anchoring her to the floor. How could they hide something so huge? Why had no one ever slipped up, not even once? The next morning, she confronted her parents. Her mother looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her father tried to deny it, at first claiming it was a clerical error, a mistake. But when Emily pulled the certificate from her pocket, the silence in the room turned into a war zone. Her mother left the table, her father sighed, and then he said something that shattered her. "You weren't supposed to find that." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't blink. "So who is she?" she demanded. Her father finally admitted it. Maria was her biological mother, a woman he had an affair with while still married. She had gotten pregnant, wanted to keep the baby, and for reasons no one seemed willing to say out loud, Emily had ended up living with him and his wife. The story was vague, disjointed, but the betrayal was loud and clear. Her mother, the woman who raised her, came back into the room, cold, stone-faced, and unapologetic. "I didn't sign up for you," she said, "but I did what was expected." Emily felt like the floor. The search for Maria became an obsession. Emily spent hours scouring old records, reaching out to extended family, even messaging distant acquaintances she found online. No one wanted to talk. Most ignored her. Some gave vague warnings, let the past stay buried or you don't want to open that door. But Emily had already opened it, and there was no way she was closing it now. She had lived in the shadows of half-truths her whole life. She was done being kept in the dark. Weeks turned into months. She worked odd jobs, slept on friends' couches, and chased lead after dead-end lead. Then, one day, in a dusty envelope buried in an old family photo album, she found a postcard. No name, no return address, just a photo of a beach in Oregon, and on the back, "I think of her every day. I hope she's safe." Emily's heart skipped a beat. The handwriting didn't match anyone she knew. And the dates, 19 years ago, the time she would have been a toddler, it was enough. Emily packed a bag, bought a bus ticket, and headed west. Every mile closer to the coast made her chest tighten. She didn't know what she was expecting. A hug, an apology, a woman who might slam the door in her face. All she knew was that she had to try. That somewhere in this unraveling mess, there had to be a piece of her that still made sense. When she arrived in the small coastal town, it felt like stepping into someone else's life. Quiet streets, salty air, and a lingering feeling of déjà vu. She showed the postcard around, asked shop owners if they recognized the beach, the handwriting, the image. Emily made her way to Sunset Point with cautious hope stirring in her chest. The beach stretched out like a dream, soft golden sand, weathered rocks, the cry of distant gulls echoing above. She sat on the same bench the florist had described, her hands trembling with the weight of what might come. She waited. Morning drifted into afternoon. No one came. But something told her this was only the beginning. The next day she returned, and the day after that, locals began to notice her. A few offered coffee, smiles, or kind words. One man, a retired fisherman, finally spoke. "You waiting for Maria?" he asked, peering out at the waves. Emily nodded, unsure what to say. "She don't come here anymore," he said softly. "Not since her accident." The words hit her like ice water. Accident. She followed the thread, asking more questions, chasing more shadows. Eventually, it led her to a small assisted living home just outside town. Her heart pounded as she stood at the front desk. "I'm looking for someone," she said, her voice shaking. "Her name is Maria. She used to come to Sunset Point." The nurse at the desk gave her a long look. "Room dozy," she finally said. "But she's not the same." Emily walked down the hall, each step heavier than the last. She hesitated at the door before pushing it open. There, in a small chair by the window, sat a woman with long silver hair and distant eyes. She looked fragile, empty. But then, as Emily stepped inside, Maria turned. Their eyes met. It was like watching two mirrors reflect each other. There was no need to ask. No one had to say it. They both knew. Emily whispered, "It's me," and Maria began to cry. The silence between them said more than words could. Emily approached slowly, unsure if Maria would embrace her or push her away. But Maria reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed Emily's cheek. "I always knew you'd come," she whispered. "I dreamed of you." Every night, Emily's knees buckled as she knelt beside her, resting her head on Maria's lap like a child. In that moment, time folded in on itself. They talked for hours, sometimes in words, sometimes just in glances. Maria spoke of her youth, her mistakes, her regrets. She told Emily how she'd been forced into silence by shame and fear, how the man who raised her was never meant to be a father. Emily learned about the letters, the ones Maria had written but never sent. She kept them hidden in a drawer by the bed. Emily read them that night in her motel room. Each one was soaked with longing, heartbreak, and guilt. "To my daughter," one began. "If you ever find this, I want you to know that I loved you. The moment I let you go, not a day passed that I didn't feel your absence." Emily's tears stained the paper as she read line after line from a mother who had carried her in secret and mourned her in silence. Over the next week, they met every day. They shared coffee, laughter, old photos. Emily brought Maria her favorite pastries and books to read aloud. They were strangers trying to reclaim something time had stolen from them, and in those quiet, stolen hours, they built something new. Something fragile, but real. But time was still the enemy. Maria's health was declining fast. The nurses whispered it might be weeks, maybe days. Emily could feel it in Maria's hands, how they shook more each morning. How her voice softened like fading light. So Emily made a choice. She would stay, as long as Maria needed. Emily moved into the spare room at Maria's small apartment. It wasn't much, just a cot, a lamp, and a closet filled with years of memories, but it felt more like home than any place she'd lived in years. Each night, they'd talk until Maria fell asleep mid-sentence, and Emily would sit there, watching her mother's chest rise and fall, realizing just how quickly life slips away. One night, Maria asked her to read one of the letters aloud. Emily's voice trembled as she opened the yellowed envelope and began, "My dearest daughter, today I saw a girl on the bus who looked just like you might. I wonder if you like poetry, if you hate mornings like I do, if you have my laugh." When she finished, Maria was crying. "You do have my laugh," she said with a smile. In the mornings, Emily helped bathe her, brush her hair, paint her nails. She never thought she'd be capable of such tenderness. It surprised her how natural it felt. Maria had once been a stranger name on a document, a ghost in her dreams, but now she was her mother, and Emily had become the daughter she never had the chance to know. But not everyone saw their reunion with warmth. One afternoon, a woman named Lorraine knocked on the door. She claimed to be Maria's neighbor and friend, but her tone was sharp, her eyes cold. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed when Maria dozed off. "You have no idea what that woman's done." Emily's stomach twisted. "She's dying," she replied. "That doesn't make her a saint," Lorraine snapped. The words haunted Emily. She began to wonder what exactly had Maria done. What part of the story had she left out? The letters were full of love, yes, but also secrets. Things half said, things erased. Emily didn't want to doubt her mother. Not now, but curiosity has a way of turning the heart inside out. Late that night, while Maria slept, the letter began with trembling script, like someone had written it through tears or fear. "If you're reading this, it means I never had the courage to tell you everything, not the whole truth." Emily's chest tightened. The words were not like the others. There was no warmth, no poetry, only guilt, heavy and unrelenting. Maria wrote that she hadn't simply been forced to give Emily up. She had chosen to. She was 20, living with a married man who promised her the world, then disappeared when she got pregnant. Her own parents were furious. The shame was too much. She claimed Emily had died during birth, but that was a lie she let everyone believe, even herself. For years, she told herself it was mercy, that Emily would grow up better off with a stable family. But the truth was, Maria hadn't fought for her, hadn't searched, hadn't written, not until her own heart began to break from the silence she'd created. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she wrote, "but I had to tell you, at least once, the truth." Emily read those words again and again. Her mind spiraled. All those years feeling abandoned. Now to learn it wasn't just circumstance, it was choice. A choice that shaped her entire life. She wasn't sure whether to scream or sob. Her legs gave out, and she slid to the floor, the letter crumpling in her trembling hands. Morning light crept through the blinds, touching Maria's face as she slept. She looked so fragile, so peaceful. Emily sat beside her, watching her breathe. The anger throbbed like a drumbeat, but beneath it, sorrow, because now she understood. Maria had been just a girl, scared, alone, and full of regret. When Maria stirred, Emily didn't say anything at first. She just took her hand. "I read it," she whispered. Maria's eyes filled instantly with tears. "I never stopped thinking about you." The next few days were a haze of slow conversations, cautious steps, and unspoken emotions. Emily didn't rush to call her mom or tell anyone. This truth felt too raw, too new. Every time she looked at Maria, she saw pieces of herself reflected. Her smile, her hands, even the way they sipped tea the same way without realizing it. It was disorienting, but also strangely comforting. Maria didn't ask for forgiveness again. She simply tried to be present. She told Emily about her life, the regrets, the wrong turns, the lonely nights, and Emily, despite herself, listened, not because she was ready to forgive, but because part of her needed to understand, to connect the missing dots of her own life story. One afternoon, Maria brought out a worn photo album. Inside were pictures of a young Maria, full of life. On one page, a single ultrasound image was taped, faded with age. "That was you," she said. "The only picture I kept. I used to take it out and talk to it when I thought no one was listening." Emily stared at it in silence, her throat tightening. Tears rolled down Maria's cheeks as she said, I know I don't deserve a second chance, but if there's any part of you that wants to know me, I'm here. Not just as your birth mother, as a woman who made mistakes, who's still learning to live with them. Emily nodded slowly, unsure of what she could promise, but knowing she didn't want to walk away. Later that evening, Emily stepped outside to clear her head. The air smelled of rain and pine. She looked up at the sky, asking herself what kind of daughter she wanted to be now. What kind of woman? She realized that her story wasn't broken, it had simply been waiting to be rewritten. Back inside, Maria had fallen asleep on the couch. Emily sat beside her and quietly placed the ultrasound. The next morning, Emily woke up before the sun. The house was quiet, filled with the kind of silence that only exists after something important has been spoken. She stood by the kitchen window, watching the light break through the trees. In her chest, the ache was still there, but it had shifted. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was something softer, a kind of beginning. Maria stirred on the couch, rubbing her eyes and stretching like someone who hadn't had a peaceful sleep in years. When she noticed Emily already awake, their eyes met in an unspoken understanding. There was still so much unsaid between them, but now, the silence wasn't so heavy. It had space for possibility. They shared coffee in the kitchen, barely speaking, just two women, mother and daughter, trying to figure out who they were to each other. Emily didn't offer a dramatic declaration. She didn't hug her mother or call her mom, but she did something simple, something real. She made 2 cups of coffee and didn't make Maria ask for hers. Later that day, Emily returned home. She didn't feel the same walking through her front door. It was as if the world had tilted ever so slightly. The betrayal still hurt, and the lies hadn't disappeared. But she was different now, stronger, grounded, and maybe, just maybe, open to healing. When she got into bed that night, she held the ultrasound photo in her hands. For the first time in her life, she felt like she knew where she came from. Even if that place was imperfect and full of shadows, it was hers, and she had the power to decide what came next. If you've made it this far, thank you for walking with me through Emily's story. It's a reminder that family isn't always defined by perfection. Sometimes, it's built from pain, stitched together with truth and just enough hope to try again. And next time, we'll meet another woman whose entire life was